If you're looking for a getaway this winter for rejuvenation and transformation, join Psychedelics today for our vital retreat at Blue Osa in Costa Rica. Blue Osa is an eco-resort that's all about harmony with nature. It's nestled between the jungle and the beach and primarily runs on solar power. And included in your vital journey are 8 days and 7 nights accommodation, 4 transpersonal breathwork sessions, 2 as a breather and 2 as a sitter, 3 farm-to-table meals per day, and you'll also receive a $50 gift certificate for the on-site Blue Osa spa so you can indulge in some relaxation. Spend your free time taking a dip in the natural pool, exploring miles of secluded jungle beaches, and experience guided birdwatching hikes at sunrise. Stay active with daily yoga, intuitive movement, and CrossFit practices to keep your body and mind in sync. There's also free Wi-Fi if you wish to stay connected. Your group airport transportation is also included, making it a hassle-free adventure. So if you're ready to reconnect with nature, yourself, and other like-minded healers and professionals, join us this January 6th through 13th, 2024. Visit psychedelicstoday.com/events and scroll down to the Costa Rica retreat page for more info.
Every year, psychedelics are becoming more accepted into mainstream culture, and people all over the world are asking themselves, how can I get the skills, foundations, and tools to build a meaningful career in psychedelics? Well, that is exactly where Vital comes in. Our 12-month interdisciplinary practitioner training program is robust, inclusive, and most of all transformative, both personally and professionally. Our graduates have gone on to do many different things in the psychedelic space, like working at ketamine clinics, consulting on clinical trials, opening a retreat center, starting their own coaching or wellness practice, and even launching a psychedelic media and merchandise platform, and so much more. Classes start January 23rd, and our application deadline is December the 20th. But if you apply and enroll before November the 19th, you'll save $750 from tuition. Head to vitalpsychedelictraining.com to download our full course curriculum. You can also check out our events page at psychedelicstoday.com to sign up for an upcoming Q&A session or to join an expert-led topical taster webinar. Find out whether Vital is the transformative journey you've been looking for.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here, joined by Reggie Watts. Reggie, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Hell yeah. You just came out with this amazing book. I'm really loving the audiobook. Great Falls, Montana. And I started encountering you, I think it was some of your solo kind of comedy music albums, but then I got really sucked into Comedy Bang Bang hard. And I was having such a good time. So thank you.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. I love the Bang Bang.
Yeah. So you're mostly known as a comedian, improv guy, but I think like I started really getting into your back catalog of music, and it kind of blew my mind. Like all the really cool stuff you had been doing before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes by so quickly. Sometimes it's like I forget until I'm reminded, which is kind of nice.
Right. So, and in this book, and I guess for people that don't know, were you at Denver for MAPS? Like, did you kind of show up a little bit there and talk at all?
Yeah. I was got super mapped out. I was there for a panel. I think it was like psychedelics and film or TV or something like that. And then we did the show with it was Eric Andre did a set, I did a set, and then Flaming Lips did a set. Right
on. That's awesome. When I heard the rumor that Eric Andre was going to be there, I was like, are they kidding? Eric Andre on stage? You I think made sense. And I was like, Eric Andre is so funny. But like, yeah, so I was just happy to see you there and glad you got on stage and did some fun stuff. And I think the scene's happy, like, really lucky to have you because you've been kind of around this stuff for a long time.
Yeah, long time.
Could you maybe talk about that? Like when did psychedelics really kind of show up for you? And when did they maybe start feeling like a useful thing for you?
Yeah. I mean, I started, I think like the first actual psychedelic I did. I can't remember. I think I got stoned first. But then the next was acid, and that probably would have been like age 16. That would have happened at, and that was just mind blowing. When I took LSD, I was just the whole universe opened up as one of the most absurdly humorous, funny things I'd ever experienced. It was Yeah, it was pretty mind blowing. And yeah, so I would say like as early as 16.
That's amazing. And when did you kind of, well, actually, before we jump there, did you feel like it was too much for you at that point in your life, or you were already kind of a bit different as a human, but like, was it excellent or was it like a little too much?
Um, no, I mean uh, no, it was. You mean like integrating it, or how do you mean?
Yeah, perhaps integrating it. Yeah.
I mean, no, not really. I mean, I wanted more. I wanted to explore more. It just was definitely one of those times when I thought, I need to find out what else lies, beyond what I'd already experienced. So I was always interested in that. Always interested in doing it with friends, and comparing notes and having adventures and things like that. So it was pretty natural, pretty easy.
Was there any kind of influence on your music or improv at that point in your life from it?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if there's anything like directly that I could point to, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I'm sure it did. It definitely gave probably new angles on things, different motivations, perhaps. But yeah, yeah, nothing that I could be like this happened and then this happened, but definitely, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. That's. I'm sure the person that has that figured out has an interesting story, but like, yeah, it made me do the flanger pedal a little different or something.
Yeah.
It's like
Oh, right.
really,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
really.
mean, sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, it would have to be like, for me, it would probably be like deeper, systematic, things. But I would probably say, whenever you put yourself in a situation where you're viewing the way that you're observing things differently when you're observational of your observational state, of course, you're going to make adjustments, to many things that you approach in life.
I think one of the craziest things in the beginning of your book, Reggie, was how deeply um, self-aware you were at young ages. And I'm sure you see that as, you're not seeing that in too many people, maybe worldwide, but like you had this very interesting superpower. What do you think was going on there?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was just kind of happening, but yeah, I mean, all it just feels like is just, I just had this propensity of, being aware of the reality I was in, and because I was aware of it, felt like I could take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like you
And
did.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like
And I think
like
that was a
I'm awake.
superpower.
Like, what can I do? What's that?
Superpower for psychedelic sessions too, I think, like being able to have that level of awareness and insight, I think is really
Ah,
helpful for folks.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's your base. That's the thing you're trying to work with, to kind of have conversations about what it is that you're experiencing while you're experiencing it. It's like, kind of everything.
Exactly. And when did you find, like, was that the point in your life when these 16-year-old experiences, is that when you found psychedelics could be useful for you? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, friends being interested in it, and providing, access to, this drug that came through town. And luckily my friends were really interested in doing drugs. I was very happy about that. We weren't my crew of friends didn't really do alcohol that much. It wasn't really a strong factor in what we did. I wasn't really a drinker. I mean, once in a while I had a beer or something like that, but I was more excited about psychedelics. I thought that there's much more useful experience than alcohol. Alcohol has, I don't think, rarely created anything, at least in my life right now, or anybody I know. Like, it's never created anything particularly interesting. Um, but psychedelics for sure, like LSD and mushrooms. And mushrooms I didn't experience till I got to Seattle, but LSD for sure, and dextromethorphan from Robitussin for sure was huge.
Right. Yeah. The access there is super interesting. In DXM, it's a fascinating one. I wish I had that kind of focus, Reggie. That would have saved me a lot of time. That's great. Yeah, man. So you've got such an interesting career, like in my mind. You've done so many different things. And was that like, it's kind of like the psychedelic dream, honestly, to not just get pigeonholed into one thing. You can just keep exploring new stuff. How do you like to think about your kind of like ever-changing direction, if it may still be ever-changing? I don't know if it is anymore.
In regard to, I guess,
yeah,
that.
So like career path. So you've had such an interesting career path, right? And like, how do you like to think about how you jumped between, music, comedy, improv, live music, things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like, it's almost like all the things that I do in my life are a reflection of the experiences I've had, internally, even in, like psychedelics. And so I'm just kind of doing like an outward expression version of those experiences and trying to reflect those and create that state in my act, and maybe, create that state in the audience as well.
Yeah, I like that. That's fun. It's like a Terrence McKenna thing of trying to show people what you mean, but doing it through different art forms. It's like a pretty cool model.
Yeah, 100%.
I never considered it that way, but that kind of makes sense. Like thinking about some of your sketches in Comedy Bang Bang. I'm like, yep, that's something there.
It's funny because Comedy Bang Bang is an interesting example because I never wrote anything for it. I was just in it, but it definitely reflected an aesthetic that that makes sense for me to be a part of. And I don't know, what level the writers had gone through psychedelics. I guess I'm used to, in the entertainment industry, I'm usually surrounded by people who are timid about psychedelics. People who have fear about psychedelics, and so they joke about it, or they create sketches that simulate it in the best way that they can with the limited amount of experiential knowledge that they have. And I think sometimes they do nail it. I think they nail it. They do it really well, because ultimately it's just human perception. So, if you're, good at understanding that, you can definitely scramble it and, do a pretty good representation of it. So I don't think you need to do drugs to like simulate drugs in art, but I do like it when someone understands the subtleties of experiences. And we don't have, we talked about that at MAPS, the MAPS conference on stage, about, what TV show or film accurately, showed what an acid trip would be like, and so forth. And there were just very, very few examples that we could point to. So, I think it's just interesting to be a part of something that's not necessarily made by psychonauts or anything like that, but they're doing their best guess on it, and sometimes they get it right. But ultimately, it's always weird, and that's really the only point of the program, anyways. But so they're completely successful in doing that. But
yeah,
I just find it's interesting sometimes to me, because I'm like, well, I've experienced quite a few things, but I'm not really involved in the writing process. So
yeah, it's awesome. So just thinking about that, like what were some of the most closely accurate scenes? I can't think of any.
I think there are a lot of examples of really good, what I call D-core shows, which stand for dissociative core. I think the things that are compatible with it, like any David Lynch film or movie is very dissociative. Or I saw Buffy the Vampire Slayer recently, and that was super dissociative, crazy absurd. And so I think that, like, in a mind state of, kind of dissociative point of view or representation, I think there are many, many examples of it. When you're talking about simulating a psychedelic trip, generally, I don't know, I guess The Simpsons might kind of get it right. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the carpet scene was something that Donick was talking about, and Eric Andre was talking about, that they thought was pretty accurate about that. Yeah, like LSD and mushrooms, it's a little bit harder to represent. People don't really necessarily get it very well. There was a movie called Bong Water, and in the middle of it, Jack Black and a bunch of, I think, Luke Wilson and a bunch of other people are in the forest, and they do mushrooms, and that mushroom trip is kind of relatively accurate.
I love that. I'm gonna go get some bong water. That's good. I think
very delicious. That's what I'm drinking right now.
So can you talk a little bit about this idea of being a disinformationist?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, disinformationist, to me, it was something I came up with when I first moved to New York in the early 2000s. I was very fascinated with the Situationist Movement. Like Guy Debord, I guess, was started in the 50s. This guy, Guy Debord, basically created these rules for observing reality and interacting with it. That was kind of Dadaist mixed with absurdism and architecture. And so I was fascinated with that because of the pranks that they would play, these kind of large scale pranks that would kind of push people. I mean, it'd be very similar to what, kind of like a smarter version of what Jackass would do or something like that, just like these kind of social experiments to a certain degree. So I was fascinated with that. And then I kind of thought about disinformation, which is essentially just mixture of truth and lies. And it kind of just creates a lot of uncertainty, so people don't know what to accept as true and what isn't. And I like that approach in doing what I do, because there's some truth in it and some just absurdity. Not really lies; they're just absurdities. I think they're pretty obvious, but maybe to someone else they can't discern the difference. But the idea is that it creates a lot of instability in the audience when they're observing it, and an unstable audience is my ideal state for an audience, because then they're no longer in an expectational mindset. They're more freed and open to whatever's coming down the pike and happening in real time.
Wow. That's super neat. So through comedy, actually breaking their kind of mind state and being able to expose them to comedy they might not react to in that same way. That's pretty sweet. And it reminds me a lot of what's happening in kind of certain art scenes, right? Like I'm sure I've done plenty of that kind of, Guy Debord style stuff, and never really considered it as like a piece of art. It kind of is. You see the art students hanging out in some cities and they're doing wild stuff. And I love it. The subways. What is it? There's like subway creatures on Instagram or something. There's so much fascinating art in the subway.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Definitely into that. So, let's see. And at what point did you decide you wanted to get somewhat public about your psychedelic use?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. I would say, I don't know. I feel like in a way that I've always been pretty outward about it. I mean, it was never any secret, when I would talk to friends wherever I lived in, Seattle, or, I mean, I was definitely very outward about it in school amongst friends to a certain degree in high school. And then in Seattle, I was pretty open about loving drugs and liking them. And then, yeah, all throughout, I was definitely a big stoner. I have always loved marijuana. And then when I moved to New York, doing more traditional stand-up and getting a lot of stage time, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily talk about it directly, but I think people could tell. And when I was off stage, I would talk very freely about it. So I don't think I've ever not been open about it. I think ketamine was something that I was a little bit more secretive about because sometimes there are stigmas associated to that. But when my friend Mark Rebier hurt his hip and he couldn't make a gig at Outside Lands Festival in San Francisco, I filled in for him. And that was the first time I talked publicly about ketamine and in its medical applications as well as its recreational applications. And I remember some outlet picking up an article about that, saying that, he promotes ketamine, usage or whatever, which I do. So that's probably been the most like secretive that I didn't really think like I'm going on stage and I'm going to talk about ketamine. It just kind of came up because that's what I was exploring at that time. And so I just talked about it.
Yeah. It's such a divisive substance in the space. This is one thing that really drives me a little nuts in psychedelia generally is you fall into this camp and like you have to abide by that camp's rules. It's like there's a lot of substances out there to test out and learn about, and ketamine's one of them. And it is very radically stigmatized, and I'm not really okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's and it's a weird one too because it's been around a lot in the club scene, and it's been used as a party thing. So it's got this, 5 people in a bathroom stall, doing bumps off of keys, kind of a thing. And then when you try to apply that, take that drug and say like we're doing clinical trials, so it's like there's kind of these conflicting ways of viewing it, and I just don't. I'm not really. I don't like it when people are very segregational about a substance. The substance is neutral, and it's up to the individuals, who are using it, whether you're using it in a formal clinical, application with a therapy and a professional, or you're doing it recreationally. I think they both create experiences that you could learn from depending on your mind, your mind state going into it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So many people need so much help too. And if we're talking clinically, like the amount of work we need to do on the America's psyche generally necessitates we include ketamine in a helpful way until we find better stuff. The better stuff's just not legally available, right?
Yeah. I mean, technically you can do some mail, there's these services. I think one's called Cloud with a K, and there's a couple others that they somehow are able to just legally mail it to you. I don't know how that works, but they can. And generally it's clean, there's no fentanyl in it and things like that. So there are some avenues, but it's still weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's still, not cheap, but it's at least inside the medical establishment. I've had some, what did I get? 6 pills for $14, 100 milligrams each, lozenges. So that's not really a bad price. Yeah, right.
That's really cheap.
And there's some, that was from a legal pharmacy. And like, I think some people get it even cheaper. So I actually don't believe I've ever purchased, I didn't thinkingly purchase ketamine on the black market ever. I think I've purchased it. I just have no idea what the pricing was when I did it. So, but I know the big swing in pricing, right?
Yeah. I don't know either. I mean, it's like one of those mysteries where I'm like, I mean, I've gotten ketamine in a bag, or whatever, got like a Costco size bag for whatever reason, because I didn't know, what I was buying. I didn't know anything about ketamine the first time. And I was like, well, let me get a bag of ketamine. And then, and it ended up just being this giant bag that lasted for years. Like 3 years I had this bag of ketamine. And then eventually I was just like, okay, I got to start giving this out because this is ridiculous, But I mean, not like just arbitrarily, but just like giving people experiences and, having people come over and like do setting stuff. And, I was like, I need to get through this. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's an interesting one to have in the club scene, the psychonaut scene, and others. Like my biggest ketamine experience was an injection.
Oh yeah. I
And
can't wait
I
to
went
do
pretty
that.
far. I think you'd find it quite interesting. I don't know. It's not as interesting to me as the tryptamines, but have you ever bumped into like John Lilly, like these guys that were really exploring it with float tanks in the old days?
No, that sounds interesting. That definitely sounds interesting.
Like super high dose in a float tank. With
Yeah,
needles.
that I'm into. I mean, I really want to start checking that out because, yeah, those places that you go to are just insane when when you really go into a K-hole, and it's just incredible. Like I just, it blows me away how much I learn, how much I see.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can get kind of there through nasal application, whatever, but like it's not as close. So yeah, you have kind of a position around being interested in many types of drugs. Like how do you, I guess you went to the MAPS conference, so you got to see all this. I think I actually saw you walking around Wonderland maybe the previous year in Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this topic of psychedelic exceptionalism comes up a lot. Like we're better than you because we do better drugs than you, and we don't deserve to be going to jail, but you do, kind of thing. Like how do you relate to that whole thing?
God, certain drugs are just shitty. They're capitalistic. They're just created because of capitalism, and it's just like the system just produces these types of low quality, you know, terribly synthesized, uh, drugs like amphetamines and they're basically like things like cocaine and meth and all amphetamines and things like that, or even like people doing Adderall and Ritalin, which has a similar effect. Um, they're not really, these are drugs that are supposed to be used. I kind of had this realization with cocaine. I've never really been into cocaine. I don't really like the way it feels, but I realized like cocaine is not the base. Amphetamines are not a base drug. They're what you would call a modifier or an augmenter. So they're, to me, cocaine can be interesting if you are already on a base of, I don't know, ketamine or something like that, and you took a bump of it at a certain point during a trip, and that might modify or enhance the experience. But I don't believe that they were ever meant to be like, that's what you do. Like, that's tonight I'm doing cocaine, or today I'm doing meth. Today everything in moderation has a healthy balance. But unfortunately, these drugs produce these in the moment, insatiable, voracious appetites for them. And so it's just this feedback loop, and people get hooked on it because it replaces their ability to function normally without it. So those are very, very dangerous, and those are shitty drugs. And those types of drugs, of course, are going to land people in trouble. It's going to land, the prices are going to get higher or the prices are going to fluctuate madly because of the risk involved in actually selling it, manufacturing it, but then dealers dealers are going to try to make it as affordable as they can to their clients because they're going to keep their clients hooked on it. It's not a healthy relationship. So of course it's going to create desperate people that are going to resort to desperate things, whether they do criminal activity or whether they're just, harming themselves. And then, intervention needs to happen in some form or another. So I don't really necessarily view it. I mean, yes, I know you're asking, like there is this kind of perception of like, these drugs are, for people that are really conscious and mindful, and these drugs aren't. But there is kind of just a functional element to these drugs, which is like heroin is not really functional. It's in its base form, in opium form, and it's just like plant form, like taking it straight from the plant. There's something very medicinal there. If you take coca leaf and you just chew on the leaves, or you make a tea out of it. That's really medicinal, but that's like the natural, kind of nature's version of that. And there's something there when it's in that base form. It's when you distill it, when you really just kind of like condense it, like isolate the components and like strip it away from all the other elements and just like condense it and make it more concentrated. That's when things suck. And it's not like you can really do that with LSD or mushrooms. I guess you could take the spores and condense them in a liquid form or something like that, and make like a sludge that's very powerful per drop or something like that. But the idea of psychedelics, it doesn't really function the same way. It's not like you take a psychedelic and you're like, I got to be on this all the time. It doesn't really, maybe in rare cases, but in general, people just have a psychedelic experience. So they have a journey and they see things, whatever. Ketamine, it's a shorter version of that. And DMT is a hyper shortened version of that. So I guess the point is, like, every drug, despite the socioeconomic implication of its usage and how it's distributed, has a usefulness factor to it. And I think that can be very obvious. The stigma of how it affects different socioeconomic brackets and populations, that's just a product of capitalism and people taking advantage of something that's very addictive, and people with addictive personalities. So yeah, I mean, it sucks. That disparity is true. I think the attitude is wrong if people are thinking of it in that way, though.
Right. Yeah. I see it often as like ayahuasca versus the world, or mushrooms versus the world. And there's so much utility in LSD, ketamine, many other things. And,
yeah,
I like to frame it, Reggie, like I want to support people's right to do drugs that aren't good for them, because the alternative is putting people in cages forever. And it's like a far worse situation, domestically here at least.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree with that too. And again, like, it's I'm kind of like a one note wonder on the subject, but it's really, capitalism is really at fault for a lot of this. People wouldn't be pushing certain things if they didn't make a shit ton of money off of it. So the only answer is devalue the market by creating more freedom for people. I mean, maybe it devalues it, who knows? But at least it keeps people out of jail, because it's not necessarily their fault. Yeah, they're making the decision to do it, but it's not their fault that the drug is so addictive. It's not like,
Right.
Drugs are addictive, you shouldn't do it. And it's like, well, you knew it, and so you didn't listen to us, and now we're going to imprison you, because that'll teach you a lesson and stop other people from doing it. It's like, it'll never stop anybody from doing drugs. There's nothing you can do to stop people from wanting to do drugs.
No, legal consequences do not matter. No, we've learned that for, many years. So back to your book a little bit here. So it's called Great Falls, Montana. That's the first place you lived in America. Have you moved back to Montana?
No, I never. I know I haven't
Okay.
moved back there, but
Okay.
I have a house there. The house I grew up in there. My family house is still there, so I will go and hang out there on occasion.
Cool. And why did you want to title it Great Falls, Montana?
It revolved around my high school experiences, and that's where I went to high school. And also just the town itself is an interesting place and had a big effect on who I was and how I grew up. So I thought it was important enough to give it the attention that it deserves.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. The scenes you painted there were so interesting, and I could relate to some of them and envious of some of them. Like, it was super weird and interesting. And yeah, I think I don't want to give too much away, but I think people will like those sections of the early high school development phases. And I guess a quick plug for the audiobook too. Like, you did, I think, some fun improv in the audiobook, and also some audio insertions. And I think you even sang that song that there's a copyright warning about or something.
Oh, Girl Watcher. Yeah.
Girl Watcher. That's right. That was pretty funny. But I love it when there's just extra in the audiobook. So thanks for doing that.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I wanted to it was an opportunity. Why not?
Right. Exactly. So ketamine, like why ketamine for you? Is it like, does it make you feel like a lot better in the long run? Like for me, it's kind of an immediate break from whatever's going on. An immediate state change. But what do you particularly like about it?
Uh, I don't know. It kind of it creates a playful state for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like where it kind of puts everybody in an enhanced kind of enlightened state in a way, because to me it puts you close to what I call a paradoxical state. Um, and in a paradoxical state, it's hard to be as binary as we tend to be. So we're a little bit more free to just roll with things that don't make any sense, or make a lot of sense, but in a very, very beautiful, symmetrical way. And I think for me, at low to mid doses, it's very social and very adventurous and very silly and goofy. And I love that. I love that place. I love being able to laugh at. I guess in some ways, it's nice to have other people along for the ride, because I think about this. Uh, I think about the things that I see in ketamine like all the time, and I think it's funny that sometimes when I'm doing ketamine with other people, everybody can now join in on that reality. So I have more people involved in that way of perceiving things, and so for me personally, it's just an opportunity to hang with other like-minded visual or individuals. I enjoy that. I just think that there's an adventurousness to it, and I love experiencing it with people that again aren't afraid of doing it. Just like, we're going to do this, not in an addict way. I definitely have been with people that are just like, can I have more? And I'm just like, oh, that's a different vibe. You're thinking of this in a different way than I am. For me, I'm just like, let's do this. Like, oh, that was great. You want to continue doing this? Yeah, let's do another dose. Okay. And that's more
Mm-hmm.
the adventurous spirit of it. And I find myself sometimes feeling a little bit like a pusher or something like that. I'm the person going like, do you want to do a little bit more? Like, I'm afraid to just ask people. And then if they say no, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for asking. It's the stupid anxious state. And so it is nice when I'm, amongst professionals where they're like, no, we're going to do this. And we're doing big doses, and there's no qualifier to it. It's just, that's what we're doing. And I'm like, yes, freedom, like, I don't have to worry and be like so anxious about it. Like, are you judging me for wanting to do this? Again, the stigma, I haven't been able to figure out how to get out of it, but yeah, but I just enjoy it in that aspect. I just think it's very, very fun and insightful and expansive. And I love doing it with people that are willing to come along for the ride and have an amazing experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to a lot of that on the positive. And I think initially when I started seeing it show up on the party scene I was participating in, what I was seeing was people were just, going face first on the ground a lot more often. And I'm like, guys, it's okay to sit down.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
lay
Well,
down.
because I think like people expect, I don't know what it is. I guess they're partying, right? And so they're like, a party drug, you should party and you should be able to walk around and be functional, which is true if you know your dosages. But like, I think people treat it like it's alcohol or something, or I don't know, maybe cocaine or something like that. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
it's more of a precious commodity than that.
Right. And, another element I didn't like, but I'm starting to see develop in the culture a little bit more, is people trying to figure out how to make it more social instead of just be so insular and like shut in, like the 5 people hiding in a closet kind of situation.
Yes. Yes.
Where it's like, let's, figure out ways to be a little bit more integrated with it and like not make it so sneaky and make it like
Yes.
part of the fabric of the thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was at a party not too long ago in Hollywood, and I was at this composer's house, and a bunch of people were there. It was like I don't know, I'd say it was maybe like 15 people. And I had brought my lozenges, my ketamine lozenges, and they're 200 mils per lozenge. And so I was I just kind of presented it and was like, hey, does anybody want to try these or whatever? And luckily everybody was interested. So it was really nice. And so I was giving half doses and just telling, giving people the the rules about like, letting it sit under your tongue and, all that stuff. And people would keep coming back or come up to me during the time because I was just kind of sitting in one place, and people would, come up to me and report their trip progress. And it was just nice to see people having a really good time and having this amazing discovery, period amongst all their peers. It was really wonderful to be around that many people, who are open-minded and experienced enough to be open-minded and to be collectively having this incredible experience. And that really blew me away. That was one of the best times, and where it didn't feel like there's someone's like, no, I can't do ketamine. It's like, why not? Oh, because of fear. Oh, okay. Well, that's disappointing.
Fear happens. The fear can take hold.
Yeah, I know. I'm not judgmental, but inside I'm going like, oh.
It's too bad. Yeah, I hear that.
Okay. But I tried. Here's an opportunity that you might not get again in your life, but sure, pass it up. That's fine.
But I like the way you earlier said, the way some people asking, can we get more? Can we get more? Like in a kind of freaky high chasing way, as opposed to like, oh, we're here doing it in a casual manner, social casual, versus like, I'm trying to get super duper high. Maybe in the wrong environment. I think that's really important for people to try to dial in for themselves. Like, what are you actually trying to go for in a certain environment? And is it actually appropriate at all parties to go that far? Maybe some are, it's okay to just dip your toes in a little bit, go waist deep. And maybe the other stuff is for a more private scenario.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I had an experience with a good friend that I don't see that much in New York, but it's like when someone's asking, for more, when I think like we've had a pretty good amount, and then they're asking more on top of that, I'm like, ooh, like I don't know. I mean, it's okay, but I'm like, well, I feel like, I don't know, for whatever reason, I feel like I'm good at judging reasonable amounts of things and dosages, and maybe that's just my hubris or something like that. But I have a certain amount of confidence about it, and I've just had a lot of people tell me they're like that dose that you said would be perfect for me was great, and I'm like, good, yeah, I know you're tentative, and I gave you a dose that I knew wasn't going to be overwhelming for you, So I think in general, I have a pretty good sense of like, oh, this is a great amount. Should we go one more round? And then we're all collectively deciding to do that, as opposed to I individually need more, which is I don't know. It's different. It's just a different vibe. It feels more, addicty, which
right.
is scary. Can be.
Totally. It's a little uncomfortable. I've seen it with nitrous oxide quite a bit. I've seen it.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
The worst.
It's uncomfortable.
Not a fan. Not a fan.
Like I've had some very interesting experiences on it,
sure.
But I really try to space it the hell out. And I just see what can happen to some people. I'm like, I don't know if that's for me right now.
Yeah. I mean, I have too. I mean, I've definitely, there's the whole K nitrous connection that people talk about. But I have a few friends that, they go all night, and it's just not I don't know. It's just not, to me, it's kind of a little bit of it's a garbage drug in a way. Like there is a small window of usefulness to it, in certain situations when you add it, especially if you're using the clean version of it, because there's a lot of like gross stuff that's in it when you're just getting it from like a party store or something like that. So there's a toxicity element to it, or impurities element to it. And then there's just the hyper addictive, because we used to do Freon in high school, which is a similar effect. And it would create greed. We'd call it, the greedy mode that would happen. You'd fill up a garbage bag full of this stuff, this gas, and everyone's chasing around for it. It's like, I need more, I need more. And everyone was so greedy in that moment. And certainly, like, as a kid, feeling that for the first time, that can be pretty incredible. There's like a element to that that's like, oh, I'm experiencing this intensity of wanting to have more of this weird gas that we're breathing in. There's, I wouldn't give that back, for anything. Other elements of it, yes, for sure. As it dragged on, the diminishing returns, like, people were passing out on it. People were, fainting and almost hitting their heads on glass tables and, stuff like that. And I'm like, that's not good. This is not good. This is something that, if you are able to have good self-control, and are asking the right questions before you're doing something, that's one thing. But it doesn't really produce that. It's very rare that people are going to have that mindfulness with that. Again, it's a modifier that's being treated as a base. And so people are really like, this is my base state. I'm going to be doing nitrous, which is insane because the high is what, like 2 minutes, maybe?
Yeah.
And so you're having to re-up, and you're damaging your hearing. Like the filling it up is so harsh and loud. It's at least 120 decibels every time you hit that tank. So I'm at a party and I'm constantly being like, anxiety, because like someone behind me is like, oh, like the whole night. It's so loud, and I'm wearing earplugs and not happy with it. Like, it's, yeah. Anyways, yeah, nitrous is. I'm very disappointed.
I like the idea of yeah, totally. I like your idea there of like a taxonomy, like a modifier versus a base. I think that's an interesting concept. Obviously we use these things this way sometimes, but don't like think about it that way. Often, like systematically, maybe like nitrous oxide at the tail end of a bigger LSD dose is pretty fucking interesting, but
yes,
way less interesting just to do nitrous oxide alone.
Yeah, all night for hours.
Yeah, like I've done that, but I'm like, I'm
Sure.
not really seeking it actively,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really fun. Now next up is the big topic these days in psychedelia. And I'm actually really curious of your perspective. So, microdosing. Like, what are your thoughts on microdosing? I'm giggling a little bit because, like, your comments about fear earlier. Are you only doing microdosing because you're afraid for the big one, or like, what is it there? But like, what are your thoughts lately on microdosing?
Without really doing a lot of research into it, other than just hearing friends saying like, I'm microdosing, I'm microdosing. I like to get high, like, and microdosing to me is like, it's just, for me personally, I'm not interested in that. I've tried it a couple times. People are like, these are microdose, do one drop of this. It's whatever, 1,000, whatever the measurement for LSD is, like for like how diluted it is. They'd be like, this is diluted, one drop is, that's and I'm like, I just don't, there's something about it that it just bothers me. I'm like, just do it. It's like someone like taking a tiny sip of something or a bite of something. And I'm like, I know it's good. So just have it, like, just, it's going to be fine. We'll help you through it, whatever. Just try it so that you know what the full experience is.
Back at it, man. So microdosing, yeah, like I like the concept. I like that some people are getting help by it, but
Sure.
I'm also a little bit concerned about like the macrodose going a little extinct. I don't think we're super at risk, but like the cultural taboo against it, like we should be making opportunities for people to have that macro experience if that's what they want. Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like we're kind of on the same page there, but I do, there's so much research that needs to be done still before we can really even speak to it. But
Yeah.
Everybody's microdosing.
Yeah, I think it's just like a fad, and because it doesn't have the full commitment to it, it's easy for people to do. And certainly it, on a societal level, it kind of loosens up the idea of psychedelics in a way, because now it's moving into the mainstream as microdosing, so I guess it can be helpful in normalization to a certain extent, at least the awareness of these substances and how they can be used in a quasi medicinal version. But yeah, I don't know. In general, I'm just like, I don't want to microdose. I'd like to experience whatever. I mean, different than like I was at a music festival and we were doing ketamine for basically, throughout the event. That was our major drug that we were doing. But, we had a little bit of MDMA and we had a little bit of liquid mushrooms, throughout the night. And so those were our modifiers. And then my base which is always like my base layer is always THC and edible. So like I have an edible as the base throughout the entire evening. And then I add, ketamine as like a middle strong layer. And then there's like some modifiers along the way. And in that context, it's more of feels like a chemistry thing. It's more like formulas and laboratory chemical, like adding ingredients and things like that. I think it feels more like that to me. And that to me is kind of, I don't know if it's microdosing, but it's, it's definitely like adding modifiers to enhance trips at certain stages in all the various arcs that you're on.
Right. 'Cause sometimes these days are very long and you have to like keep modifying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I say I like taking breaks too. I'm always happy that I don't really miss any. I'm not jonesing for anything. I'm not like, I need my kratom. I need my kava. I need my whatever ketamine. It's like I'm just like, no, those are fun things. I look forward to that. But I'm also who I am at all times.
Yeah. Yeah. Edibles for me are a really staple baseline for sure. Yeah. It can get pretty far out sometimes. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's highly adaptable. Like there's a lot of it does a lot of things. It's a very flexible and dynamic experience in my experience.
So as a singer, like you have incredible range. Like, do you try to avoid smoking and try to stick to edibles?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I experiment with like, vaporizers, like, this one's supposed to cool, plant matter or whatever. And so I'll experiment with vaporizers. They still kind of dry and makes me feel a little dried out, so yeah, so I do try to stick to edibles mostly. I think that the technology for edibles, is great and very robust. Like we've got some, and now you don't have to worry about it being, what I hated about edibles in the past was that they were always, it was an edible was like a cookie or a gummy worm, like it's like, why does it have to be kids candy? Like what, like we need to move away from this bullshit. And so, so there's a company called Level. There's a bunch of companies, but this company Level, they make these really great high quality molecular extracted THC products that are just pills, and you just swallow the pill and you're done. There's no cookie, cinnamon, crunch chocolate bar, whatever, all that bullshit. Like I don't need that. I don't need the calories. I don't need the fireworks. I just want the drug. And so so now at least I have adult options when it comes to to THC, and it is a wonderful substance, and there's so much more to learn about it. So I enjoy THC to the max. Yeah, to the max. But I usually just try to save my voice. Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's got to be a big deal. Yeah, my biggest issue is eating gummies after I brushed my teeth. Like, how can I not remember? Come on.
I know. And they're gummies, which is just sucks. It's like they just stick into your teeth, and it's like this extra thing you don't need. Like, well, I don't need that. I don't need that. It's like, no, it's a gummy, so it's advertised. I guess you're at a party or something, and someone who's maybe THC hesitant sees a gummy and they're like, it activates a curiosity or so. I guess, I don't know. I don't really get the point of it.
So what are you, hope, you've got a voice, you've got a little bit of influence. Like, what do you hope your voice can kind of add to this psychedelic and drug conversation more generally?
I just want, what I love about psychedelics, especially when you're mindful about it, is it's an adventure. It's an adventure into self-discovery and from that into world overview, understanding, and your relationship to reality. And I think that that's incredibly powerful and helpful, and can help resolve a lot of conflicting issues that we have. It might not solve, but it'll definitely soften and put you on a road to having a different relationship to trauma and a different relationship to ruts and cycles that you find not efficient for your lifestyle. And so, and just create a greater connection to the whole of existence. And so I promote that at all costs. And I try to, my message is, reduce the fear of it, and do, if you want to try, if you're truly curious. And again, it's not for everybody. I'm not trying to say like everybody needs to do this, but I am promoting it so that if people are kind of on the fence, like I always say, like, certain drugs are very safe, and as long as you're, know your source and, those things. But when you find a community of people who take it seriously, they are going to know the source. And, stuff like ketamine is medical grade, so you can get medical grade ketamine. So that's safe. Safety is number one, of course. But more than that, I love supporting people wanting to explore themselves and wanting to get to know themselves and continue to be in a creative, questioning, inquisitive state that human beings are supposed to be into, instead of othering other people and like forgetting that we're all related to one another, and then coming up with stupid excuses to externalize our insecurities within ourselves. And so I think that psychedelics really promote, I think it's like there was that article about the white supremacist that took MDMA and kind of realized, like, what the fuck was that? What was I doing? What was that? And not to say that that'll happen every time, but I mean, something like that usually happens, at least for a moment. Someone gets this insight of like how interconnected everything is, and how incredible it is to be awake inside of life, and what advantage that gives you to your health, happiness, and your integration into society, and all of these various things. And that life is goofy and adventurous and explorative, and, and that it's fun to be helpful, to help others and to solve problems. And that's our natural state. All the other states are all just learned, and people taking advantage of insecurities and weaponizing people's shame. And so I think like psychedelics kind of pull that curtain back in a pretty intense way, and show how irrelevant all that shit is.
Do you have any advice for people on, quote unquote, keeping it on the rails? For me, you have to kind of go off the rails for a moment to like understand why you want to be on the rails, but I don't know. It's not really great advice.
Well, yeah, gotta get off the rails, stay on the rails, just to be real. Yeah, I mean, I just think like, there's a lot of fear. People have fear about, going into chaos, to like, they fear like, if you go off course, I could die, like it's essentially, it's a death thought, whether it's, losing the sense of who you are, going so far off the rails that you lose your ability to take care of yourself, or you become disconnected from your community, or, whatever it is, however you want to view it. But, when you're in the right context, going off the rails is awesome, because you need to break all of those patterns that you need to reassociate to the reasons why you want to keep living. And I think, taking a psychedelic trip and allowing yourself to go wherever it is that you want to go. And we're just keeping that thought in your mind that it's a trip and it's going to end at some point. And when it does end, you will be back on the rails, so here's your opportunity to just go for it. I think that that's just important for people to experience. I mean, people experience it in a car crash and they survive the car crash, or, near-death experiences are great examples of that. It's like totally off the rails, but like with real world physical consequences. But sometimes people come back from that and get a new appreciation of who they are and life and so forth. Not always, but many, many times. And so I think like the value of doing things that are uncomfortable, doing things that make you possibly have a little bit of an ego death or a big ego death are incredibly beneficial. But I also understand the fear around it. And, I don't think anybody should be pushed into a pool, but, at some point they may want a little help, and, may ask somebody to do so when they're least expecting it, and that can be very, very helpful, as long as it's consensual.
Have you explored a 5-MeO DMT yet?
I've had DMT, but it's the synthesized version of it.
So 5 is slightly different. There's there's an additional bond in there, and it's like comforting, like everything's okay.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Dissolving into unity with the all, whatever that is, and
sick.
Very different set of experiences. It's usually tied into the toad thing, but people are thankfully catching on that it's going to go extinct if we keep smoking it.
Yeah, bad for the toad. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it's super cheap, like synthetically, so people should definitely be going that way. It's kind of like a new one in the clinical space that's looking really promising, but in the underground it also has always looked really promising.
You have to smoke it?
You can do a little vape.
Yeah.
That's how I did it.
Yeah, because that's my only bummer in my experience of DMT is the smoke bums me the fuck out. It's so caustic and acrid. It feels like and I know that someone was telling me that certain pens, like they're milder and things like that. I'm certainly into trying it. I just had some bad experiences with the smoke, and a couple pens where I felt like I just don't want to smoke a Brillo pad. So that's the only turnoff. But if there's a variable that like is smoother and nicer, I definitely would love to finally fully experience DMT, because I've only kind of like done the one hit, really, really high, but like you're supposed to take another hit or another hit after that even. And I never went there because I was like, this is too high too quickly. But I'm definitely interested in it 100%.
Yeah. The solution I had was a dab rig with a water filter. For
nice.
Whatever reason, people aren't coughing, which is great.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, for what it's worth.
Yeah, no. I'm into it. I mean, it's hopefully in the future we'll have better methods for taking these things. An inhalant, like a vapor, like a nebulizer, would be a great thing for ketamine and for something like 5-MeO. But yeah, I would love that. Or adjustable dosage, pressurized skin, shooter, like in Star Trek, old Star Treks, just just like dial the dosage. That would be sick. Although
program it
addictive wise, a little bit too convenient perhaps. But anyways, it's like I like the healthiest version of something for ingestion. But yeah, like I said, I would definitely check it out if it was like a mellow, groovy version.
Yeah.
I mean, not the high, but just how you
administration. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can barely smoke weed. Edibles though, all day.
Weed, I can pretend to like, I can hang tough. I'll be like, yeah, so what are you guys doing? Like, but it's more like me just going like, this is cool. Like I'm going into like, this is cool. I'm hanging out with people and, smoking joints and, whatever. But then the next day I feel like shit. So, yeah. So I can, but I'm kind of pretending.
I love it. So, as a way of wrapping up here, I just, want to give you a chance to like talk about what you were trying to do with your book and, where people might be able to find it.
Yeah. You can find it, I would if you want a hard copy, I would definitely go to your local bookstore. Your local independent bookstore would be great, and ask for it. If they don't have it, that would be really cool. Promote independent books. Otherwise, you can go to any bookstore, and you can order it from Amazon. There's an Audible audiobook for it. Yeah, those are the ways.
This is the way. Yeah. I wish we got to talk more about Star Trek, but thanks for bringing it in in a future episode.
Love
yeah.
it.
And just for people, you got Nick Offerman giving a blurb, Sarah Silverman, Fred Armisen, Ann Conan. It's awesome. And
I got lucky. Good friends.
That's so great. All right, Reggie. Well, I really appreciate you joining us, and I hope we can do it again in the future. And thank you for being a vocal proponent inside the space. I really appreciate it.
100%. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.